Ezekiel 40. All right, everybody.
It's dragon fruit B12. It's good.
Pep in your sin.
I need it.
All right, we're gonna finally end Ezekiel today. So we're gonna be looking at Ezekiel 40 through 48. Zekiel. IAL. So we're just gonna read bits and pieces of this because most of Ezekiel 40 through 48 is a lot like reading Numbers or Leviticus in the Old Testament. Lots of this is this by this and this weight measurement and this and this and that. Yeah, so we'll kind of hit the gist of it. So as we get to chapter 40, it is again another vision that Ezekiel has. There it is. All right, so Ezekiel has this vision where he's once again teleported / transported, whichever way you want to look at it, back to Jerusalem. So we'll read the first 4 verses of 40. If someone would read that, first 4 verses of chapter 40.
In the 25th year of our exile, at the beginning of the year, on the 10th of the month, in the 14th year, you weren't lying. On the 14th year after the fall of the city, on that very day, the hand of the Lord was on me, and he took me there. In visions of God, he took me to the land of Israel and set me on a very high mountain, on whose south side were some buildings, and that looked like a city. He took me there, and I saw a man whose appearance was like bronze. He was standing in the gateway with a linen cord and a measuring rod in his hand. The man said to me, "Son of man, look carefully and listen closely and pay attention to everything I'm going to show you. For that is why you have been brought here. Tell the people of Israel everything you see." I got to go get my white glasses.
Yep.
Sorry.
All good. So again, like I mentioned, Ezekiel is teleported, transported to Jerusalem, and he's met by a figure again, which is presumably the same person, figure, messenger, whatever it was, that he saw the last time he was transported to the temple, when he saw all the bad things people were doing in the temple, the idolatry and all the other crazy stuff. And so he's transported back again. The same guy is showing him around, and so he's being guided. And so the date here tells us is the 10th day of the first month, which corresponds with the festival of the Passover, which we know is an important Jewish festival celebrating when they were released from captivity in Egypt. And then when he says it's the 25th year, that can be understood. So it's 25 years after Ezekiel's been taken into exile. So the 25th year is symbolic also, because it can be understood. Everybody's phone's ringing today. Because it can be understood. Got like simultaneous phones. But the 25 year is understood as a halfway mark to 50, which in Old Testament, every 50 years they were supposed to celebrate the year of Jubilee, where all who were enslaved, all who had debts, it was forgiven. And so this date's important for Ezekiel's vision because it's connecting their story, their ancestry of their deliverance from Egypt, the celebrations of Jubilee, that liberation's to come. So maybe the day of liberation is not yesterday with the tariff stuff, but it's actually for Ezekiel. We were talking about that before he came. But for Ezekiel, this is a sign of liberation.
I was sitting here thinking that while you were.
I have a year of liberation.
When they were freed of their dues and all their debts, school.
Yeah.
Right.
School debt.
yeah.
I'd like them to let go some of my debt.
So Ezekiel is I couldn't pass it up. It was too good to make that
It
connection.
was a slam dunk.
Um,
It was a layup.
I do what I can. Whoever watches this later should be like, "What are you talking about?" But
Much appreciated.
I do what I can. So he's seeing this vision that's gonna be an expression of their release from the exile. So this is the promised vision of what's to come for the people. And so for Ezekiel, this becomes a turning point for the exiled community. And so it's so everything up to this point has been a lot of messages of judgment. Then of course we had the restoration. And so now his vision's gonna communicate that they can forget about the past and look to the future when they will be also set free like their ancestors had been set free before. And so that dating is just really important. And so I wanted to lift that up for us. And then from verse 5 on for a few chapters,
Yeah.
Wow.
for
Get
a
out
long
your-
time,
Get out your
we get
pencil and draw.
a description about the temple. So where he's taken is the temple. He's taken to the east gate of a temple, and then he starts his journey. So if you read ahead, you know that he got a full tour of the temple and the Temple Mount area and learned how large it was going to be according to this vision. But we should understand that this vision is an idealistic vision, not a literal blueprint of what's going to actually happen in the future, because there's no evidence that once they came back with Nehemiah and Ezra and rebuilt the temple that was anywhere close to as large as Ezekiel imagined it would be. But we know, if we've learned nothing about Ezekiel, we know he has a great imagination. And so he was just thinking about the biggest and the best when he was reimagining the temple being rebuilt.
Yeah.
I'm more
6, 8, 10.
we
No, you're all the way down through that.
I was just doing a general
40.
yeah, basically
40, yeah,
40.
sorry
But
about that.
we're somewhere in.
yeah, 40
The
through
outer court.
She's about to skip over.
I'm going to skip over a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, so
The
the
outer court, the
chapter
back
40 and 41 is description of the dimensions of the temple is basically what it is. Very idealistic. And he even gets into the decor and the furnishings and all those things. So if you're interested in reading more about that, you can read chapters 40 through 41. Oh, there you go. She's got a model from.
Yeah, there's a picture.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
So it's very, very
I love the
grandiose.
Yeah, I do.
But that's the one that he imagined being that grand.
Yes.
But the one that was in fact rebuilt is the one where the western wall is still there.
Correct.
Okay.
This is the third temple vision.
Beautiful.
So as it's described, it's double the size of what the original temple, Solomon's temple, would have been. And the one they built for Ezra and Nehemiah, I believe, ended up being close in proximity to the same size as Solomon's. So, because it would have been important for them to get it fairly close to the original when they finally rebuilt it. We're actually going to skip to chapter 43. Because 42 does more descriptions about the inner temple. And it does talk about, he reestablishes kind of some of the rituals that were in place before the idol worship and things desecrated the temple. About, only certain priests could enter the inner sanctuary. Priests had to conduct themselves in certain ways in order to be in those inner chambers. So again, it was just a
Closed or unclosed.
So it was just a kind of
Collected
going
enough
back
money.
to the idea of
Collected enough money.
purity
Yeah.
in practice. That was really important for those of the priestly orders. And so if we remember the last time Ezekiel was teleported into the temple, what did he witness happen as a part of that? The last time he was in the temple, if you can remember. We lost it a little bit. What did he see leave the temple?
God.
Yeah. So,
Had
so that first
the
vision
pillar.
he has with
The pillar.
God on the throne with the wheels in all directions, he saw that leave the temple the last time he's there. So now we're going to see what he sees this time when he's at the temple. So let's read. That was leaving the. So
He's coming
There,
in.
there,
Now, if you turn it this way, he's leaving.
there you go. All right, that works. I love it. That works.
you know,
You want me to read?
Yeah,
God bless
let's
me.
go ahead and let's just read through verse 12.
Then the man brought me to the gate facing east, and I saw the glory of God of Israel coming from the east. His voice was like the roar of rushing waters. The land was radiant with his glory. The vision I saw was like the vision I had seen when he came to destroy the city, and like the visions I had seen by the Kibar River, and I fell face down. The glory of the Lord entered the temple through the gate facing east. Then the Spirit lifted me and brought me to the inner court, and the glory of the Lord filled the temple. While the man was standing beside me, I heard someone speaking to me from inside the temple. He said, "Son of man, this is the place on my throne, and the place for the soles of my feet. This is where I will live among the Israelites forever. The people of Israel will never again defile my holy name, neither they nor their kings, by their prostitution and the funeral offerings for their kings at their death. When they placed their threshold next to my threshold, and the doorpost beside my doorpost was only a wall between me and them, they defiled my holy name by their detestable practices, so I destroyed them in my anger. Now let them put away from me their prostitution of the funeral offerings for their kings, and I will live among them forever. Son of man, describe the temple to the people of Israel, that they may be ashamed of their sins. Let them consider its perfection, and if they are ashamed of all they have done, make known to them the design of the temple, its arrangements, its exits and entrances, its whole design and all its regulations and laws. Write these down before them so that they may be faithful to its design and follow all the regulations. This is the law of the temple. All the surrounding area on top of the mountain will be most holy. Such is the law of the temple."
So we have Ezekiel witnessing now God returning back to the temple and filling the whole complex. So that's another reason why Ezekiel imagines it so large, is because he's going to imagine God encompassing the whole temple as well. And then God consecrates, makes holy again the temple that was desecrated by the people. And so then again, God claims that the temple will be the dwelling place of God as it was understood before this point. But there is now at this point, there's going to be a change in temple worship when they return, because they now have a theology that God is not just in the temple, even though here there's a reclaiming. God's been with them in exile. God is other places. And so then in Judaism, they'll start building synagogues more locally for folks to join for worship. So by the time we get to Jesus, you have folks go to the temple for the high holy days, or unless they're in Jerusalem. But beyond that, they're doing their weekly Sabbath practices or Bible studies, or when they were learning under rabbis, when young boys were learning under rabbis, they went to the synagogue. And so there starts to be a shift in Jewish thought and practice around the temple after they return. So it's interesting to me that you have Ezekiel, who is the one who kind of begins understanding that God is not just confined in the temple, to seeing God back in the temple again.
seeing him leave and then, in his visions and things like that. Interpretation, please.
Oh. Sure. What? Where you at?
And the glory of the Lord filled the temple.
Mhm.
What does that vision, what do you think he means by that?
If we remember in the vision, right, the first chapter,
Yeah.
he says he doesn't talk about actually seeing God. He talks about seeing the glory of God. So he's saying he's seeing something that's indescribable, but he knows it's God. That's kind of what he
Like
means.
all that gold and all
Yeah.
the sun rays
Yeah.
and
The
in my
rainbow.
mind, when they're talking about that, it's later on the same way as the glory filled Mary.
Mhm.
I mean, I feel like the
Yeah,
Spirit,
it's like
the Holy
a
Spirit
Okay.
filled Mary.
a feeling of the presence, right? I think understanding the presence of God is right. Yeah, we have that song. Was it surely the presence of the Lord is in His place?
Yeah.
So I think that's like an experience of the glory of God.
It's something you
That
feel.
felt, yeah.
Yeah.
I felt
Feel.
that way at the Sistine Chapel, if all those
Yeah.
people would quit talking. It was like a zillion people in there.
Yeah,
And
that
they
kind
kept
of
going.
is.
Colin.
You get 15
When you
minutes.
walk through something blind.
No.
She went all
The
over
man
the
kept
place.
asking, I mean, it was people from all over the world. I'm like, y'all, just sit and just, cause
Soak
it
it in.
was, now I gotta say, it was so inspiring to me.
Mhm.
But people rude, talking, whispering, passing stuff, sit there. We only got, what, 10 minutes to sit there, something like that? Oh, you were at the hotel with the bad man. Yeah.
All I can say is that I agree with you. I would
It
rather
was
just
so
stand there and feel it.
amazing.
But you don't know that how God is making them feel was that they needed to spread that word.
I guess, but the
Everybody's
sign
just crazy.
clearly
Said,
this
don't
is
talk,
for
right?
everybody.
Right.
And this is coming from somebody who can't stop talking about it. So I did get that feeling. I mean,
Yeah. I
it
agree
was
with
just-
that. It's awe-inspiring.
it is.
I felt that way. I saw
I mean,
what was
I'm
it?
not saying I got what this guy got, but it was pretty awe-inspiring.
The statue in Rio.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
I stood at the bottom of that and you're just like, I mean, you're coming up this mountain, the road's about like this. And it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you're standing at the bottom of it and it's just awe-inspiring. So that's sort of what I think. I think that
I agree.
whatever he is making this so big, it's undescribable. We can only describe what it means in a little bit because God itself is so undescribable. Hence the universe, right, Sherry? Whatever you say.
Whatever you think. I'm reading the parts I missed.
Okay.
Oh.
Very enlightening.
Something.
LSD.
I know.
We hope not, but you don't know.
I don't know.
All right.
All right, so God's presence has returned to the temple, and then we move into chapter 44. And it's a reminder that even though things are returning to good, that they were bad, right? So like it's almost like things are gonna get better, but don't forget what you did that got you to this place. And so
Things are going so good, but I'm waiting for the shoe to drop.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So at the beginning of 44, if we remember that what he saw the last amazing temple was the desecration, which meant that most of those who the temple was entrusted to were not making sure that things were going as they should, namely the Levites, which was the priestly clan, who were specifically designated to be the keepers of the law and the rituals and the temple once the temple was built. And they didn't do what they were told, and so they're gonna.
Wait, who were the Levites?
The Levites were the priestly tribe. So you have Jacob. No, what? yeah, Jacob has 12 sons, and his son Levi, his descendants become the priests.
Okay.
So that, of course, changes when you get post-temple worship too, because rabbis are not. You get rid of the priestly order of things, and it just turns into rabbis. But yeah, so
Teacher, a rabbi could have been from anybody's
Yeah.
family.
Yeah.
Okay.
and so that kind of all those kind of traditional lines break at those points, and so the Levites were going to face punishment because they contributed to the Israelites falling away from the ways of God. But there was one subsect of Levites who came from, they were descendants of Zadok, and who Zadok is, we don't really know, other than he is of that priestly clan. But they actually kept, from what we understand from Ezekiel, they actually kept at least the inner sanctuary holy. They didn't allow the desecration of the temple to happen in the Holy of Holies. And so, because of that, they preserved the sanctity of the sanctuary. They're the ones who now are going to be the only ones who could enter the Holy of Holies because they did their part. Of all the Levites, they did their part to make sure the temple.
So they weren't in charge of the other Levites.
Yeah, according to Ezekiel.
According to Ezekiel, that
Yeah.
makes it into one.
Well, yeah, I don't know all the personally, I don't know all the ins and outs of how those kinds of roles were designated. That's why I said according to Ezekiel. Because I'm not sure if certain groups were in charge of certain things. Money, maybe.
Back beforehand, one of the many ways they were, desecrating.
And then they're reminded within this section that the priests need to give back to their role of teaching the people the difference between what is sacred and what is profane, or what is true worship of God and what is idolatry, because that is what's profane to God and what God calls why the folks go into exile in the first place. It was because of idolatry, because they profane God's holy name. And so the priests need to get back to that role of making sure people know the difference. All right.
Idolatry, that's just a really prevalent thing.
Yeah,
It's
I
just
mean,
dawning on me.
And it's big.
yeah, I mean, every time in the Old
In our
Testament,
lives,
yeah,
in Bible times, it's
Yeah.
just bad.
yeah,
Practically
Um,
from day one.
Yeah.
yeah, and we get that again. Of course, Revelation pulls heavily from Ezekiel. And actually, I'm going to mention both Ezekiel and Revelation in my sermon on Sunday, very briefly. So, we'll test and see if you remember the part where I talk about. But,
You're just teasing us to make us
teasing, now you get me, what?
I'm coming.
Yeah. So if you come, if not, you can tune in. But, yeah, idolatry is the problem from the beginning. People turning away from God towards other things.
I agree with her. Dana brought up a couple weeks ago, maybe about why did God let us have that ability to do it? Because it's still around and it's gonna be.
Yeah.
I guess a learning experience and growing.
I think it's a part of love, because if you truly love someone, you allow them
Set them
that
free.
freedom. Yeah, there's a freedom in that.
If they come back to you, it's because they love you,
Yeah.
not because
It's
you
a
made
test.
them.
It's a test.
I mean, you know, that's just like us with our children.
Exactly. And we are his
No
children.
matter what,
Right.
you may not like what they do, you may get mad at them, but when it comes down to it, you know, that love will never die for a child. That's what he is, our Father. I wish sometimes he'd lay the belt to some more than they did, but,
It kept us out of trouble, didn't it?
yeah,
Or
didn't hurt
had that
me.
belt there, I went, yes, sir.
I mean, you know, some of the parents need the belt more than the children.
Mhm.
What is it leaking here too? I'm paranoid about it.
Just in a couple of
All
spots.
right, I've got
There's
enough
leaks in the church.
I've got a roof leak. No, here.
Oh,
No, the parsonage just got a wet basement, and that's groundwater, and ain't no way to.
well, tell me about it. I know.
All right. How much of this do you guys want to read? I'm leaving that to you. You want me to just keep explaining as we go?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay. It just gets pretty tedious.
Cause I've read this twice.
Yeah, that's enough. All right, we get to chapters 45, and you get descriptions about land being set aside for the Levites. So in the law of Moses, the Levites are taken care of because they are going to be taking care of the temple. So there's provisions in there that a certain percentage of offerings go to their care and well-being. And of course, things go awry when they don't follow that, but that's on them. And so again, you get provisions about how are the priests, Levites, going to be taken care of. What's the land for the city and others who come. Well, eventually, later on, I think it's in 48, you get the description about how the land's going to be divided between those 12 tribes of Israel, which, and I forgot to make copies, so I apologize, but I have a map of Ezekiel's vision. So he's imagining that things are going to be equitable and just and right and according to his mind. So you get a fairly standardized kind of strip of land for each tribe.
All
Where
the way down from
This-
Israel
from
to Judah?
Israel, yeah, well, even farther.
Oh,
So,
okay, I should look.
Yeah, it went
so
a lot
on my
farther.
map, so it goes further. So Judah and Israel would have been about, let's see, what's the Sea of Galilee? So Israel and Judah would have been about this much of the map. So you get some extension down past to the south and the north that would kind of be reclaimed for the people, because this is the Dead Sea. So Jerusalem is right here, and this is the Sea of Galilee, which we're familiar with from Jesus's travels. So Israel would have been up this direction some. Judah would have been down to about here. So there's
It
a
was
little bit
kinda
further
like, you
extension.
go here, and then you go here, and then you
And then
go.
there's a little bit of extension east, so this
Yeah.
would be modern day Jordan. So that wouldn't have been theirs at the time, so you get a little bit of a stretching there.
And down below, those are still a couple strips, aren't they, down into Egypt?
hmm
Yeah.
Mhm.
Interesting.
So he's just kind of imagining, because that's not how they originally were. I should have a map here. It kind of shows the original. They're near where the lands were originally divided among the tribes, but
Yeah, they weren't strips.
they weren't
were little
strips. They were
areas.
like little
Yeah.
circles. Well, you can't really see the circles, but all the names are on this map. So you have Asher, Zebulun, Dan, Naphtali, Manasseh, Ephraim, Benjamin, Reuben. So they kind of are just like swaths of land rather than straight lines east-west like Ezekiel
Kinda like
imagined.
hooks.
Yeah.
Or a sickle.
A shepherd's hook.
Divided maybe around wells or something. or
Waters, ways, or
waters.
something.
Oasis.
You know, I don't remember. I have to look that up.
That makes sense.
No, it's all
No,
good.
that makes sense,
That's
They
good.
though,
had
it
to
does.
take care of everybody.
because they had to.
Well,
you
it's
know,
not
Water strides if you had a certain distance from the well that you could take the.
Well, as I'm looking at it, you've got Asher's along the coast. Naphtali is around the Sea of Galilee, and then you got Dan, which is off the Jordan River, north of the Sea of Galilee. Then you got Manasseh, which is to the right of the Jordan River. So yeah, that probably. And there's a little water. I don't know what the stream is. It's not labeled, but from Manasseh. Ephraim's near this one, so I think you're onto something.
Are we looking at the same one now? Did I finally found it?
Maybe. Yeah.
prophets.
Mine is the settlement, my map's called the settlement of Canaan, the 12 tribal territory.
This is prophets of Israel and Judah.
But yeah, I mean, it would make sense that it would be divided along a water source of some way. It's been a while since I've read that part of the Old Testament for it to be fresh in my
I
mind.
thought you had to have it memorized.
No,
No, cause
no, not
literally
Jesus.
when you Google it,
Do you
it's
think
just
Jesus
like.
had the Old Testament?
I think
Yeah,
he had
Torah
a good,
memorized?
a good portion of it.
Wow.
That was normal for the day.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh,
That's amazing.
all right. 45. Oh, and let me get back to, I turned my page, now I'm lost. So you get later in Ezekiel 45, you get the resetting of the ritual practices of, almost there. Of
Special
Judaism. So
offerings
special offerings, special
So,
festivals that they're
yeah.
supposed to celebrate. So again, it's just a reestablishing of the covenant, reestablishing right worship and purity, so that they don't worship idols, they worship God. And so they're given rules that are to help them separate what's holy from what is profane. And then when we get to, and you still get more regulations in chapter 46.
Do you think that most everything we do in this day and age is profane? I mean, according
what do
to
you mean?
this, meaning that we do as much as we think we can to live by God's laws, but by the same token, we do a whole lot of other things that the Old Testament says.
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, yeah, certainly there's been over time, a reinterpretation
Yeah.
of what's required of us to be people of holiness.
That
So,
makes sense.
by the time we get to like our founder John Wesley,
Mhm.
holiness is understood to be not about keeping all the commandments, but keeping the main two: loving the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength, and loving your neighbor as yourself. Because he saw the sanctification work of the Spirit in us is about making us perfected in love, not perfect that we don't sin or stray or do things that are profane. We do less of them over time, hopefully, but that we more perfectly love God and love our neighbor each day more and more, so that we're on this journey towards love and wholeness. I kind of like John Wesley. That's probably why you're not a Methodist.
We had a little class, were you in it, Shannon? I love that. That little book we read, don't have to look at all. But,
Was it an Adam Hamilton book?
I don't think so.
it was, do no
Oh,
harm.
do good, do no harm, stand love God.
Do no harm.
The three simple
love
rules.
God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
I mean, it simplifies it too, where you really get it.
Mhm.
Sometimes this is overwhelming. I mean, I'm a big picture kind of
Yeah.
person.
But
Yeah.
I'm visual, and reading some of this, it's like.
Yep.
I need to see the temple, and that's why I Googled it.
Yeah. Now you only see a little bit of it if you go.
Yeah.
All right, 46, you get some more regulations. And then 47, we'll go ahead and actually read the first 12 verses, because this is a great vision. So we'll read that and talk about it. And,
The river from the temple?
yep. So the first 12 verses of 47.
That's long. I'll read some of it.
Okay.
The man brought me back to the entrance to the temple, and I saw water coming out from under the threshold of the temple toward the east, for the temple faced east. The water was coming down from under the south side of the temple, south of the altar. He then brought me out through the north gate and led me around the outside to the outer gate facing east, and the water was trickling from the south side. As the man went eastward with the measuring line in his hand, he measured off 1,000 cubits, and then led me through the water that was ankle deep. He measured off another 1,000 cubits and led me through the water that was knee deep. He measured off another 1,000 and led me through the water that was up to the waist. He measured off another 1,000, and now it was a river that I could not cross, because the water had risen and was deep enough to swim in, a river that no one could cross. He asked me, "Son of man, do you see this?" Then he led me back to the bank of the river. When I arrived there, I saw a great number of trees on each side of the river. He said to me, "This water flows toward the eastern region and goes down into the Araba, where it enters the Dead Sea. When it empties into the sea, the salty water becomes fresh. Swarms of living creatures will live wherever the river flows. There will be a large number of fish because the water flows there and makes the salt water fresh. So where the river flows, everything will live. Fishermen will stand along the shore from Engedi to Eglam. There will be places for spreading nets. The fish will be of many kinds, like the fish of the Mediterranean Sea. But the swamps and the marshes will not become fresh. They will be left for salt. Fruit trees and all kinds will grow on both banks of the river. Their leaves will not wither, nor will their fruit fall. Every month they will bear, because the water from the sanctuary flows to them. Their fruit will serve for food, and their leaves for healing."
All right, so we get a vision here in Ezekiel, and I'm going to show you a picture when I can find it, of water forming at the temple and flowing towards the Dead Sea, which is a pretty miraculous sight. Because and I'll show you when I get to it. I'm scrolling through my Holy Land pictures. That's what I'm doing over here. Because if you know, like when you're in Jerusalem, it's still in that area that's got vegetation. There's trees, and you got like the Mount of Olives, Garden Gethsemane. I mean, where there's not buildings, there's trees and vegetation. But as soon as you head east, this is what you begin to see. This is just. Let me pull this up. So this is just as you're leaving Jerusalem, headed east. So we were leaving Jerusalem, going to the Dead Sea this day, and this is what you see. It's just barren wilderness, rocks. You get a little bit of
Nothing
It's
grows.
like leaving San Diego and going east.
yeah. Well, I've never done that, so yeah.
That makes sense,
San Diego,
absolutely.
perfect weather year round.
So let me
Beautiful.
find
Go up on the mountain, up
that's the Dead Sea in the distance here. You can barely see it because of the day.
Oh, yeah.
There's a little bit of Dead Sea. So this is what you see. That's just desert. And so he's imagining that this whole landscape is going to be transformed. And yeah, this is Masada. You seen that? No, it has not. Yeah, so here's another. This is from Masada, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. Again, just desert. Probably have a picture in here.
All those
And there's a little
trees.
goat thing, whatever.
And I
Kinda
think there's
extra
still
pictures.
thousands that are hidden.
Yeah, so that's part of the Dead Sea. There. Yeah, so, and the Dead Sea, of course, is dead. There's no life in it. It is the weirdest texture water you would ever touch.
Because it's so salty, yeah.
It's just like, I don't even know if I could describe it. Yeah, it's salty, but it's like dense water. It's water at the same time. It's a weird, yeah. I knew my scientist would know. And that's why people can float on it. So this, I did not get in because you have to like, it's like a whole process to do it, but
Oh,
that's
that's the
sort of,
Dead Sea? And
that's the Dead Sea. Yeah, you can swim
I
in
could
it.
float forever on regular ocean, so at the Dead Sea.
Yeah.
I just
it's-
live there.
That's
You're
just
talking
sort of-
about the consistency of the water, how, what it feels like.
Mhm.
Have you ever cut open an aloe vera?
Yeah.
Squeeze
So
that?
it's similar to that.
It's
Yeah, they're
similar to
similar.
that.
Yeah.
It's not slimy,
Yeah.
it's just thick, yeah, but that's what it,
Well, how about, aren't they saying in there that there's fresh water and it goes to brackish? Isn't that what they're talking about, the salt
Yeah,
and the
it's
fresh
just
mix?
it mixes, but then it's gonna transform the Dead Sea into
And then it goes to the
yeah,
all salt.
yeah,
So you got fresh and salt and
yeah.
brackish in
but
between.
what he's saying here is that this water that's gonna flow from the temple from Jerusalem, that's water that flows from God, this new city, this new temple God's created, will flow and will transform. Oh, lovely.
oh,
Okay, everybody get down in the middle here.
Flash
Flash
flood.
flood, okay.
What's going on at my
Like,
house?
what?
Why?
enough days of that. Does anybody remember another thing we studied where there's this vision of water and new life?
Yeah. Where was it in?
So I narrate it for you. We've studied.
Revelation.
Yes.
I had to get
I
there.
had to go back now.
Yeah, so the
Revelation, yeah.
very end of Revelation, John the Revelator is borrowing in some ways from Ezekiel's vision. So Ezekiel sees a vision of this new Temple Mount. The holy place where God dwells is going to be restored. It's going to bring new life. Well, John takes it a step further that when there's the final victory and there's the new heavens and the new earth, there is going to be new life and a new creation. It's just going to be all of creation and not just the Temple Mount of Jerusalem. So he builds on Ezekiel's vision that when things are restored to what God's desire is, there's going to be this flourishing of life.
So when they're talking about the freshwater fish to the nothing in the Dead Sea, they're really talking about us transforming, learning and doing better. And in the middle there, we're all brackish. And then you better get it together. You're going to be in the dead part, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
Salty.
Salty
So
dog.
there's even hope for us who are a little salty.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's kind of the cap of his restoration visions that we read last week, including the dead bones coming to life. Now the Temple Mount, which has been desecrated, is going to be restored to new life. And then 48, you get the tribes get this land, which again is a restoration to the way things were intended to be in Ezekiel's mind, of the tribes owning and overseeing certain portions of land. So that's Ezekiel.
Wow.
And we did that section in 50 minutes because we didn't read about the cubits.
Yeah, that was.
Oh, come on.
I skimmed through that one.
That's why
I
I
didn't have anybody read that.
jumped over it.
That's
'cause
why
it's
I
a
always
little-
ask her to do Old Testament stuff, because I feel like I've just skimmed over it for a lot
Well,
of years. I go, oh,
there's-
begat.
Yeah, and that you can pull things if you. There's things embedded in there, but some of it you have to kind of weed through. So I try to weed through it for us, so we don't have to read it. All right,
And a lot of times it's repetitive,
it is.
and it's like, okay.
So we don't need to mark Daniel.
No, we're not doing. We are not doing Daniel next week.
We're
Maybe
taking a
the
sabbatical this
the
summer,
time
and
after
it's
that.
probably gonna be something in the New
it.
Testament.
Yeah, we'll go to New Testament. So if anybody has, no, we're gonna do something.
No,
summer.
this summer.
It will be after annual conference before we start, so it'll probably be. I didn't bring my phone, but yeah, middle of June before we start. If anybody has suggestions other than Daniel, for something we
You
want
done
to
popped
study.
my bubble, I'm not mentioning.
I said we might get to Daniel. I just need
I
a
will.
break from visions for a while. The first 9 chapters of Daniel's okay when you're in the narrative part. It's when you get to the visions part that's crazy.
Chapter 11 just about flipped me out,
Yeah.
okay? I'm sitting here going,
We can talk about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but
yeah, no, it's,
When you were in seminary or an undergraduate, where did you really study more the Bible, in seminary?
I did both. My undergraduate degree is
Was your
religion.
major like theology, religion?
So in undergrad it was religion.
Okay.
So it's a generalized study. So I did Bible, theology, history.
Right.
Same in seminary.
Did you always study it chronologically?
Mm-mm.
Cause I don't have I'm just all over the place on when this happened.
No, so in
I feel like
undergrad,
other people know and I don't.
in
But I
undergrad we
never
did.
studied it, so
It was
it's probably
broken.
right.
Old Testament was broken up into the writings,
More of a
poetry.
genre than a-
Yeah, more by genre than by chronological. History. Let's see, we did law. Let's see. I'm trying to remember. We did prophets as one, and then the law, history, Psalms is another, I believe. There's 2 sections.
Because chronologically, to me, is easier eager to learn and
Yeah.
understand.
Mhm.
But when I was in graduate school, I focused mostly on American literature. They did genres, but I know American history, so it wasn't hard to,
Yeah.
you know.
And I think that's what makes the Bible so hard to understand, because it's not even put in here in chronological order.
Right.
So you have to know a little bit about when things fall for to make sense of things. So that's why sometimes I have to stop and think, like when you guys ask me questions, and I sometimes say it wrong first, and then I go back, no, that's not right,
Yeah,
because
I can
it's
understand
You just have to go through the files in
yeah.
your brain and figure out where you're going.
yeah,
that.
jumbled
We
up.
understand that.
Yeah, and it's the same in the New Testament. So the New Testament starts with the Gospels, which weren't the first New Testament books written. Paul's letters were the first, and then the Gospels were written later. And so even like the New Testament's not even chronological order. I mean, it is in the sense that you get stories of Jesus, and then you get Paul's interpretations of the stories of Jesus. But Paul's interpretations were actually written down before the Gospel. Yeah.
So denominations that decide that the Old Testament is not relevant, how do they justify that?
Well, I don't like it. I'm not gonna tell them. I don't like it.
They justify it because they understand that Jesus kind of negated that portion and reinterpreted scripture, and so that Jesus basically overcame the Old Testament, which is a poor understanding of what Jesus did, because Jesus himself said, I came not to disregard the law, but to fulfill it. So Jesus shows us the perfect embodiment of what God's desire was for God's people in the Old Testament.
And Jesus is in the Old
Yeah, there's all the messianic kind of predictions, which we read about one last week.
Right.
But there's these things that are pointing towards Jesus, which is a part of Jesus saying he fulfilled the law and the prophets, because a lot of what is predicted about the Messiah has connections to Jesus. Yeah. So it's just, there's things we need to know and learn from the Old Testament, because it gives us a fuller picture of God's story and the story of the world. And we see these cycles, right, of us. We're making the same mistakes again. And I think that's the important part of this scope.
Has the Bible been pretty much in this order since Istanbul, whichever it was before?
Yeah, since
Constantinople?
Since about 400.
You mean
There's not,
disorder?
yeah.
Yeah, the canon was set in
I was gonna say,
450 something.
There's not been any canon since, right?
Just the, like the addition and subtraction of the Apocrypha. So, the Catholic Church has those 7 books that are in between the Old Testament and New Testament that were written during the time of the Maccabees that are not in our Protestant Bibles. So I have, one of my study Bibles has it, this one doesn't. Has those books in there. So, but yeah, for a very long time, this has been it.
And that was the same conference that said Thomas is out,
Yeah.
Mary Magdalene's
Yeah,
out.
and even
Those other gospels.
other works that were more popular at the time, like there was one called the Shepherd of Hermas that was super popular in early churches, but folks thought, didn't make it.
Did
So-
they give justifications why? Or
Yeah,
did
they
just throw
had
'em out?
standards that they went by. I couldn't tell you what they were off the top of my head, but some of it was like, was it referenced by early church fathers? So like folks who were writing theology in the 1st, 2nd century, did they refer to that work?
When did it say Spain?
Yeah.
There wasn't no
The
women
kids-
on it.
No, there wasn't. There wasn't.
There
wasn't women on it. No, because by that point you start getting that.
They probably were more brown.
Yeah, by
over
that
half
point, by
does.
the 400s, you've already had
Gave women too much
Rome,
power.
who is now in power of the church, right? Because you get Constantine converting. He makes Christianity the official religion of Rome, and from that point, things start to get institutionalized. And that's when you start having all the councils to set doctrine and belief, and this is in and this is out. And yeah,
Our
Did they
government
decide-
runs
women were
now.
not a part of that.
Did they decide at that same council in Constantinople that the Gnostic Gospels would be,
The Gnostics were, the
or they were
Gnostics
never
were,
even considered?
I think the Gnostics were out during Nicaea, which would have been, we actually just celebrated the 1500th anniversary of the
Which is
Nicaea.
before, like the
Nicaea
Nicene
was
Creed and
before
stuff?
Constantinople. Nicaea was in 323, I believe. That's what set the doctrine of the Trinity. Was
So you're gonna
Nicaea.
teach this,
I can, if you guys want to. You want to do church history, or just
Or the
scriptural
Gnostic
history?
Gospels?
The Gnostic Gospels would be good because they took them out so that women wouldn't have any power.
Well, there you go.
There's some of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I thought it was just a really good band.
Yeah, well, it's also when things got institutionalized, that's when women got left out, because there's evidence that there were women who were priests and bishops and leaders of the church
Deborah
before.
was a judge.
Yeah. So before
So-
you get Rome taking over, women
And then of
had
course,
prominent place.
there's Jezebel.
Yeah, that's a whole nother story. So you guys want to study like the history of how we got scripture or church history in general? Because we could do both. Church history would take a lot longer,
Yeah.
but we can do
No,
that.
but both of them sound appealing.
Yeah.
I've done both.
I mean, I just love learning and not having to think too
Which
much.
do you like? to do?
Yeah,
just
you,
wanna hear
you
it.
decide, and then we'll
Really,
do one,
I
and
mean,
then another,
Yeah,
another
I
time.
mean, you're doing all the work.
I mean, if we did church history, the history of how we got the Bible would be a part. I mean, a part of that. It would just be like one lesson of it. I actually taught a semester of church history at Georgetown College.
Come back with this church history.
No, the church history,
Church is.
the whole gamut.
Just pull out your syllabus and we'll go from there.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah, like I did the whole. You have to do quick. I mean, you can't cover everything, but
Unless you go to graduate school and
Mhm.
that you would never get.
you get a little, depending on how
Unless
you
it's on the
teach.
History Channel.
Yeah,
and
depending
that's
on how you
something
teach
I'm not gonna get.
confirmation, you can get a little bit of it too. But yeah, okay.
Interesting. We're working you to death, actually.
No, it's all good. This is
You're-
the good parts of my job.
I did not pay enough for this.
I know.
Okay, when's
Say
She
anything.
probably doesn't get.
No, I know she does.
But not nearly.
I mean, you're out here saving our souls.
I'm not doing that. That's God's work.
I think you're interpreting it for us.
Is conference the 8th and 9th and?
Yes, it's the second week of June this year.
Okay.
I can't believe we're gonna get out of here at 2:00.
Hey, I do what I can. Get right home before things fly too much more.
Oh, we could go back and make it longer and go back and
We
read.
don't do well.
Yeah,
I don't wanna read the queue.
That's too much.
It's like the building
Then,
of the
then
ark.
when you look down in your study Bibles and it tells you how many centimeters and then how many inches and it's like,
Can't do it.
Yeah.
40 cubits by 5
Yeah.
cubits.
See if I've got those
Right,
notes
what's
on
the
here.
cube?
What's a cubit?
What's
oh, then you find
So-
out it's 53 centimeters or 29 inches or.
Yeah, and, like there's not like a full.
That's why Google got a picture of it.
Yeah, 'cause it's.
I don't even know where my notes are for
Once
this.
in a month. I know.
So I know.
I know.
And when it rains, it